The Anglican Diocese of Grafton organises insurance for each of its component organisations, including schools and parishes. The insurance policies that are procured provide an umbrella of property, liability and other types of insurance across the diocese. As insurance coverage is important and a major expense for most diocesan organisations, knowing more about insurance is valuable. This video has been circulated among parishes of the Diocese of Grafton, so it's our hope that it proves useful for parish leaders in gaining greater understanding of insurance. Today I'm joined by Natasha Barker, the Manager of Corporate Insurance in New South Wales for Arthur J. Gallagher. In 2020, the Diocese of Grafton appointed Gallagher's as its insurance broker. Welcome, Natasha. Can I start by asking you to give a little background about Gallagher?
Sure. So Arthur J. Gallagher is an insurance broking and risk management firm, consulting firm. We were founded in Chicago by a gentleman named Arthur J. Gallagher in 1927 out of his home office in his basement, and has been listed on the US Stock Exchange since the 1900s. Gallagher has worked with faith-based organisations for almost 75 years, and it links back to actually a tragic fire which occurred in 1958 at the Archdiocese of Chicago Primary School. There were significant losses. There were 95 lives lost, including 92 students, and the losses took a huge toll on the community and the parish as they were not properly insured. Gallagher worked with them to consolidate more than 400 entities under one policy and create a new model of insurance for them, and it covered all parishes and ministries thereafter. And since that time we've expanded our services across all types of parishes and ministries and faith-based communities, and we're now in 150 countries around the world. So we're one of the largest international brokers in the world. In Australia we have more than 100,000 clients around Australia, which are serviced from more than 30 regional and metropolitan branches, and we work with small businesses right through to multinational corporations, some iconic brands as well. Our main purpose is to help you face your future with confidence, and even though we've grown significantly since those days in 1927, we're still very much a family culture business. The founding descendants of the founding members of the company are still within the business. Our chairman is Pat Gallagher. His son is in Australia heading up the commercial division. So it's very much got a family culture and a very ethical culture with it.
That's great to know. Members of the diocese will be well aware that in recent years insurance premiums have increased significantly. Natasha, can you tell us what's causing the price pressure in the insurance market generally?
Yeah, sure. So the insurance market is like other financial markets. It operates in cycles, it goes up and down. When there's lots of capital and profit, prices are low. Unfortunately, the market went through a very long period of a soft market where prices were low and very competitive for probably about 15 years or so. And then things changed about 2 or 3 years ago. There was a series of catastrophes, not just here in Australia but around the world. Remember that a lot of insurers are multinational companies with bases in the United States and Europe. So when there's wildfires in the USA, that has an impact on what happens in Australia as well. So we've had worldwide disasters such as floods, cyclones, hurricanes, bushfires. We've had class actions, and then of course in 2020 we had a pandemic. Lots and lots of losses essentially. Combined with long-term historically low interest rates as well, where insurers are not getting return on their investments, it's been a perfect storm. And that's pretty much what has led to rising prices. The hardest hit policies are property insurance and directors and officers liability, but it's now filtering through to all lines of insurance.
Right, okay. Since March 2020 and the declaration of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's certainly been an unusual time for everyone. How are insurers responding to the pandemic? And you mentioned it had an effect on premiums, but can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the pandemic was interesting because we had an early warning, I guess you could say, with the SARS outbreak, which happened in 2005. And yet, despite that, insurers didn't really take that exposure seriously. They haven't underwritten for it. They haven't rated or included that exposure in their workings of insurance premiums. So when the pandemic was declared a worldwide pandemic, the insurers went diving for cover, and they consequently started putting exclusions on policies. So particularly with respect to travel and business interruption, they don't want to pay those types of claims. And also the other dynamic that came out of the pandemic was everybody working from home, and a lot of major insurers are still operating a large proportion of their workforce working from home. That's slowed things down tremendously. So with underwriters, working in their home office, not having access to, there's good technology with Zoom meetings and laptops and so forth, but it's not quite the same. Decision making has slowed down. And there's been an awful lot of scrutiny as well. So a lot more questions are being asked about how the COVID exposures are being managed, the impact that it's had on financial solvency, and there's expected losses to come out of the pandemic as well with respect to employment practices, liability. There's been dismissals and redundancies, potential employees struggling with mental health and stress leave, and even the cyber landscape has worsened because cyber hackers have been taking the opportunity whilst people are distracted, and there's been a lot more hacking attempts.
Yeah, okay. So bringing this closer to home, parish leaders who are watching this video don't get the chance to participate personally in the renewal of insurance terms, so they can feel somewhat disconnected. Obviously everyone wants the best terms and lowest price for their insurance. So what's your advice to parish leaders? What can they do to get the best chance for good insurance terms over the long term?
Risk management is key to everything. I'd encourage everybody to be thinking, what could go wrong? What kind of impact could that have on us? And what can we do to mitigate it? So how can we prevent those risks or exposures? There are things, for example, like undertaking regular self-inspections of your property, making sure the property is safe, making sure there's no hazards around, making sure that the fire protection is up to scratch. Risk assessments before an event occurs, so before you're organising a fete or before you've got your mass gatherings of people coming together.
Yes.
So there's lots of different ways you can manage risk, thinking from a property perspective and from a people perspective and a financial perspective as well. And that's everything. The stronger your procedures are, the more you can prevent losses. You can't prevent every loss, and you can't think of every possible scenario, unfortunately. That's why you have insurance.
We wish we could.
We all wish we could. But, insurance premiums are directly related to your claims and your risk profile. So if you can minimise your claims and improve your risk profile, that will have a direct impact on your insurance costs.
That's good. The insurance industry has obviously collected plenty of records over the years. What do these records tell us about the most expensive claims that impact the insurance of religious organisations like the Diocese of Grafton and its parishes?
Yeah, the most expensive claims still seem to be the property side, property loss, and public liability. They're the two, and probably won't surprise you that that's your largest premium spend as a consequence.
In the property loss, what tend to be the big ticket items?
There tend to be, unfortunately, lots of fires that occur. Obviously, the high-profile Notre Dame fire in 2019 was a significant example of that, which was reportedly into the billions of dollars. I think $1.6 billion collected in donations. I don't think they really know truly what the total cost of that fire will be. But if you think about the construction of, a lot of churches, there's a lot of use of timber. There's not always sprinkler protection. There's rarely sprinkler protection. So a fire is probably the most common and most catastrophic thing that can occur, and that could result in total devastation, total destruction, and total loss of the property. But even storms can cause significant loss, and we're seeing a lot more of that in Australia in the last few years. We had a client who had a church in Canberra which was hit by a hailstorm, and it really shocked me to see how much damage that caused. And we're talking about a $3 million claim just from a hailstorm, with damage to roofing, the water that got in and destroyed all the interior. So even a hailstorm, which you can't do much to prevent a hailstorm other than have good maintenance on your roofs, but that can even be costly.
Considering, I had a question here, considering those risks, what basic things should parishes attend to decrease the risk? So I would imagine that in the fire scenario, to try to reduce the chance of a fire starting, and the storm scenario to make certain your maintenance of your roofs and gutters are top notch. Yeah,
absolutely. So again, I mentioned earlier self-inspection. So making sure that somebody regularly walks through the building on a weekly basis, every Friday morning, go through the building with a checklist and tick things off. You're looking for anything that could be potentially a risk for the property loss, and also for public liability as well. Public liability addresses injuries to third parties, so making sure anything that is unsafe is fixed quickly. From a fire perspective, the obvious things are having extinguishers and if you can, water systems to put out fires. But even other procedures, for instance, if you had an electrician on site, or any welding, making sure that somebody inspects where they've been after they've left, because a lot of fires start after a welder or some electrical work's been done and they've left, and things can smoulder. So making sure that someone's going back and checking every 15 minutes, every half an hour, to make sure nothing flares up from that. A really key, important recommendation as well is making sure that any contractors who are doing work on site, making sure that they have appropriate insurance, and making sure that you've got contracts with them with indemnities, so that if they do the wrong thing, you've got some means of recovering that loss from the contractor who does the wrong thing. We had an example many years ago of a club who had an electrician on site doing some work. He had $5 million of public liability insurance. After he left, something he'd done wrong caused the fire, the club burnt down. It was a $50 million loss, and he only had $5 million of public liability insurance. So the rest of that loss was on their own property insurance. You can imagine the impact that would have had on their premiums for years to come. So making sure that if you're dealing with the contractor, they're indemnifying you if they do anything wrong, and checking that they've got public liability insurance of an appropriate level for what their activities are.
That's very strong advice, thank you. Now, if our parish is contemplating a new activity, a special event, maybe a fete or an art show, for example, what advice do you have for a parish when planning that activity or event?
Yeah, so again, risk management is really important. Remember that under common law you have a duty of care to prevent foreseeable loss. So when you're bringing large gatherings of people onto your premises, even though you might be not necessarily the one that does the wrong thing, ultimately if you're organising the fete or the event, you're going to be the most obvious target if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So we recommend a risk assessment before any event. Again, having a think about what sort of things could go wrong, right down to could a snake come out and bite someone, or somebody going to trip over or slip on an ice cream, or does a child have an injury on a jumping castle. So think about every possible scenario that could go wrong. Think about how likely could that occur, and what are the possible consequences of something going wrong. And once again, if you're bringing other third parties onto your premises to assist you with that event, and by third parties I'm not talking about the visitors and the participants, I mean contractors,
ride
operators,
and,
people operating the jumping castle, for instance. We're not so much talking about your local person selling jams at the store, but really the larger, more professional organisers, again making sure that they have public liability insurance, so that if they do the wrong thing, there's some sort of recourse from them.
Great. Good. Natasha, it's been good to have you here today. I'm sure that we've all learnt something new from your answers today. I certainly have. Now, if you're a leader in a parish and have an insurance question, you can direct that question to Jenny Brock, who's the insurance officer at the Diocesan Registry. Jenny can be reached by phone on the Diocesan number 02 6642 4122, or by email to the special insurance email address insurance@graftondiocese.org.au. Thank you.